What's up everybody, Matt Maran here for another car review. This is of course the 2019 Honda Pilot Elite. Huge thanks to Honda for flying me all the way out here to beautiful Montana to review the refreshed 2019 Pilot. So about the Pilot, well, not all new. It was all new in 2016. This mid-cycle refresh though, they've really improved a lot of nice things about it. On the outside here, it's definitely a little more rugged looking than before. You have standard LED headlamps now as well, which is a great addition, and those look a little more futuristic than the previous Pilots. In the lower front fascia there, you see what looks like a skid plate and a little bit more of a rugged look than what you had in the past. This one also does have this cool sporty graphics package as well, which has this faux carbon fiber here on the hood, and there's also some stripes down there by the lower part of the side sills. And so up front here overall, I think it looks bolder than it did before and just looks a little more aggressive and looks really good to me. Going out to the sides here, I really love these wheels, which again have a little bit of a sportier look here with that little red stripe. Otherwise, though, they're just nice, attractive wheels here and look good. And you also have a little bit of chrome there on the sides, again, down by the side skirts there. That looks good as well. There's a little more of an upmarket look. Out back, you have some slightly revised tail lamps there that now have the reverse light and the tail lamp cluster there, and looks a little more refined as well, being LED. And you also have a little bit more of a rugged lower bumper there in the back as well. And so overall, you know, they didn't change too much. I think people really love the styling of the Pilot already, but they just made it a little more rugged looking, and that's, you know, to go along with all the trend these days with all these SUVs being a little more rugged and off-road looking. And the Pilot, I think, does that very nicely while still retaining its very handsome looks.
Right, for the interior of the 2019 Honda Pilot. Well, first off, if I sound a little off, it's because I have a cold. I apologize, but the show must go on. So anyway, the interior here of the Pilot is pretty nice here. Some nice improvements here for this refresh version especially. First off though, sitting down in these seats, you have these nice soft leather seats. They're very comfortable, but I will say I wish there was a little more bolstering down here by your thighs. It's a little flatter than I would like. I realize we're in a family, you know, SUV, but even some of the competitors have more aggressively bolstered seats here, and torso support is pretty good, and so no real complaints there. And I also love these little fold down captain's chair armrests that you have, and that totally frees up open this middle portion, which is just nice and able to have as a larger bin there than you would have normally. And I just like having the individual little armrest here, so that's a cool thing that most of the competitors don't have actually, so I really like that. But overall, great seats. Next to the steering wheel here in the Pilot, which is pretty similar to other Honda steering wheels, although this is a little more rugged looking, and I really like the looks of it. It's nicely leather wrapped here in the Elite trim, has a great 9-3 grip. It doesn't really have any 10-2 notches or anything, but just, you know, a nice thinner rimmed wheel, but just feels good. It's also heated here in the Elite trim, which is really nice, and you have a few buttons here, and I like how the buttons have a little bit of a metallic look to the plastic, which is kind of a nice little touch that's new here for the Pilot. And you know, other Hondas just have normal black plastic, so that's kind of a cool little touch. You also do have small little paddle shifters here behind the wheel, which is appreciated, but you know, we're in a family crossover, so most people probably won't use those, so that's why they're, you know, a little bit on the smaller side, and still feel good though. But you have just a few buttons here on the steering wheel, nothing too overwhelming, and overall a great wheel. Gauges in the Pilot here are really cool. I love, you know, it's a mostly digital gauge cluster here. Of course, you have the analog gauges for fuel and for your coolant on the left and right there, but in the middle, just a nice large high-resolution color display, and it's not overly cluttered, doesn't try and do too much, but does have all the nice functionality you expect from a digital cluster. You know, it's nice how, you know, the tachometer is not a predominant thing. You know, it's just in the top row there, almost reminiscent of the S2000s from back in the day, and you also see a digital speedometer readout there, but then that's it. The other lower half of it you can totally customize to have whatever you want. Unfortunately, you have to pick just one thing to look at. You can't have multiple things, but I get that they want to keep it simple. But you know, some of the other competitors that have digital gauges do allow you to do a little more customization than this, but it's nice. You can still have navigation displayed on there. You can have your audio, or you know, the normal trip information, even the torque split, which is a cool thing. And so it's really nice and you know, concise while still being pretty feature-packed gauge cluster. Coming over to the center of the dashboard here, right up top, you have Honda's touchscreen infotainment system, which is a really great system. And now for 2019, like some other Hondas, they have reintroduced the volume knob, thankfully. Still no tune knob. You're going to have to just hit the touchscreen there to go and scan through radio stations and stuff. But still just awesome to have a volume knob. That is it's so great. They listen to customers and feedback and reintroduce that, which is great. But anyway, this screen is very responsive. I really love the customizable tiles. You can drag and drop the ones you use most frequently, which is a really cool feature to help make it a little more streamlined, for your own personal uses. And has Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, which is great to see here and always, appreciated. And, a bunch of other cool little things that are Honda unique too. Like this has Cabin Talk, which was introduced in the Odyssey originally and now is here in the Pilot as well. And that allows you to talk to the second and third row passengers if it's a little noisy and you need to talk to them and you don't want to shout. You just do that and it uses the Bluetooth speaker and microphone to do that. And it will actually, even if the kids have on the headsets while they're watching, the Blu-ray player or something, it'll actually cut into their headphones too. So it'll stop their program so you can tell them what you need to tell them. And so cool little things like that, if you have a family, I think most parents would appreciate that kind of stuff. And it's so cool to have all those features there in that infotainment system. Coming down, you have your climate controls here, which is automatic and has a nice little display, but just a black and white, kind of a little more old school there, but still looks good and works great. Just a few buttons, nothing too confusing. And then coming down, you'll see also buttons here for heated and ventilated seats you get here on the Elite trim, and also your Blu-ray drive for the TV there in the second row. And that TV also, in addition to having, the Blu-ray capability, it has an HDMI port and a few other things so you can hook up, video game system, things like that if you'd like to. But it also has an app which will show whoever's watching that TV in the back how far you have to go on your trip. So if you have the trip plugged into your navigation system here, it'll actually tell them and they can check and see how much longer they have to go before they get to their destination, which is a cool little thing for kids who keep asking, are we there yet? They now will be able to know without asking, which is cool. But anyway, coming down, you have a wireless charging pad here in the Elite trim as well, which is always a great inclusion. And you'll also see in that area a traditional power outlet and a USB jack, which is great to see right out in the open there. Other storage spaces, going over to the doors here, you have 2 levels of pockets here on the door, and you also have a bottle holder, which is a little bit higher up. Usually bottle holders are way far down and a little bit more of a reach. I really like that this one elevates it a little bit higher, so you don't have to have quite as far of a reach to get your beverage there in the bottle holder, which is great, and tons of space in these pockets as well. So really well designed there. And then coming back over to the center here, you have your 2 traditional cup holders, which are a nice size and nicely out of the way. You have this center cubby with this little cover over it, which looks very nice and is kind of textured. And anyway, you have a huge, massive cubby here, super deep. You can even fit, like smaller purses and things like that in there, and just a really nice amount of space there. You can probably fit a gallon of milk, just set it right down in there very easily. In there, you'll also find a traditional power outlet, a USB jack again, and then also an auxiliary jack too. So great to have all those hookups in there and a ton of space in there. One other thing I do want to mention that before we go on to the second row here is in the front row here, most of the materials are pretty nice. Everything, in this roughly $49,000 Elite trim, everything is pretty nice and softly padded. The tops of the doors have a little bit of give to them. All the elbow points are very nice and soft, and so really great for resting your elbows on those. You do have some harder plastic though, around by the door handle here, and also unfortunately by your knee area here on the right hand side. That's all rock hard plastic, and some of the competitors do have some padding around here. And of course, if you have larger legs and you'll be resting your legs up against that, it would be a lot more comfortable if it was padded. And that would be a nice inclusion, especially in these higher trims of the Pilot that get well into the high $40,000 range. It would be nice to have that. I wouldn't expect it on a base model necessarily, but would be a nice inclusion here, especially in these higher trims. But otherwise, everything is still pretty nice and great quality materials. But going back to that second row there, it's a good amount of space. So I'm 5'9", me sitting behind myself here. I have about 3 inches of legroom to spare, so not cramped by any means. And it's just a nice, soft, comfortable seat again. Now you do have an option to go with either the bench, which gives you 3 in the second row there, or the 2 as you see here. You'll also find in the doors there's 2 traditional cup holders in each of the doors in the second row, which is great, and also large pockets there in the lower parts of the doors. And then in the middle there, you'll see what you could actually step on. That little center console there is nice and low, and that's deliberate so that if you don't want to slide those seats forward there in the second row, you can just run right through and step on that, and it's totally fine to get to that third row. but it is nicely rubberized there with a nice little cubby area and 2 cup holders in the middle there. And then looking forward, you'll see air vents, as well as the second row's automatic climate control. And then you have all kinds of hookups there. You have an HDMI port, like I mentioned, for a video game system or something. You also have 2 headphone jacks back there to listen to wired in headphones if you want, although it does come with wireless headphones here in the Pilot. But then you also will find a normal house current power outlet there, which is great to see, and 2 more USB jacks as well, so everyone can keep everything nice and charged up, have everything hooked up. And so I mean, for road trips and stuff, this would be a fantastic vehicle for all those purposes. And so a really great second row. And then one of the greatest things about the third row here in the Pilot is just how easy it is to get into it. It's a power slide second row, which I honestly don't think other vehicles even have this. Usually it's some type of spring-loaded switch you have to flip up in order to get that second row to go. This, you literally just press one finger on a button and then the whole thing pops forward and slides all on its own without you having to lift a finger or move a muscle. It's really, really awesome. And so that makes it very easy, and it's a nice wide space to get into that third row. And once you're in that third row, it's surprisingly roomy as well. You can sit 3 in that third row, so this is a true 8-seater if you get the bench here in the second row. And anyway, that third row, I mean, again, with the second row in its normal position there, I still, me being 5'9", have about 2 inches of legroom to spare, which is really unheard of in most 3-row crossovers of this size. And so really impressive amount of space there. And actually, I have plenty of headroom too in that third row. So I mean, the roof doesn't drop down; it stays nice and high there. So I mean, you can easily fit 8 adults in here. Again, if you had the bench, in this configuration, you can easily fit 7 adults in here. And you might be a little bit tight as far as width goes there in that third row, but otherwise, I mean, a ton of space there in that third row. Also in the third row, you'll see they have their own cup holders there as well. They even have their own air vents, and so really great for those third row occupants as well. They'll be nice and comfortable too. And so all things considered, I mean, this interior is very livable, just so great to, I think, use. I've already driven this vehicle for about 110 miles here now, and very comfortable, and would just be fantastic as a family vehicle, of course.
Cargo space in the back of the Pilot is also really good, even with the third row up there. I mean, you can still lay down suitcases there and have plenty of space. You'll see bins on the left and on the right, and also a nice, very deep cubby and very large cubby there under the floor as well, which is awesome. And then if you don't need that third row, you can fold it flat, and then, I mean, you'll have plenty of room. I don't think any SUV buyer would want more than that. I mean, it's a ton of space back there, even a power outlet back there. And it's also a power closed tailgate as well, which is really nice to have too.
But let's start up and go for a drive. The Pilot here has the very nice Honda key. I love it. It's nice and slim. It has a nice weight to it. Has a little bit of metal here on the bottom of it. Just a really great feeling key. And of course, it's keyless access, keyless entry, and push button start. So you just leave the key in your pocket, hit the engine start button, and it starts right up. Alright, so setting off in the 2019 Honda Pilot. Well, it's a really great thing to drive just from a visibility standpoint. That's one thing they've really just done such a great job. Even in 2016 when they launched these Pilots, we have a nice thin A-pillar here with a nice little window, and the mirrors kind of off of the door a little bit so it's not connected to the A-pillar there. So you have really good visibility there. It's also a little bit of a smaller vehicle, so you have a very good view forward. The hood drops down nicely, but it doesn't feel too wide. Some of the other competitors, like the Volkswagen Atlas in particular, feels very big on the road and almost a little harder to place in your lane, and you feel like you're constantly going over the lane markings because it's just so wide. This is a lot more manageable to me, and it feels a lot easier to place in your lane. It feels a little smaller in that regard, and I actually really, really appreciate that. The dashboard and everything comes down nice and low, so all those things give it a little bit more of a car-like driving experience and a little less truck-like, which like I said, I really, really appreciate actually. Otherwise, view out of the sides is great. B-pillar's a little bit further back there, so it doesn't really obstruct your view. And view out of the back is also great. If in typical SUV fashion, you have a nice large, rectangular window there. It'll be very easy to see out of. Other things to note here, throttle response is really good and responsive. So that's one of the things they improved here for 2019 is the CF 9-speed automatic transmission is a little bit more responsive now. And that's one thing that they said they wanted to improve. And it feels pretty good. Now, I haven't driven the previous, prior to the refresh Pilot, so in all fairness, I don't have a good baseline to compare it to. But compared to other competitors in this segment, it does feel very responsive, feels pretty good. And of course, since you have a nice naturally aspirated V6 engine, it's very predictable. You don't have any turbo stuff going on or any kind of waiting around. It's just gives you a downshift, and gets up and goes very nicely. Brakes also feel pretty good whenever you want to slow down here. They have it's not quite as sensitive as some other Honda vehicles. In like the Accord, it's like a really touchy brake pedal, which is good because it makes you feel very safe and it's very responsive. But this has a little bit more of a dead travel to it, which is appreciated. It is very firm with its braking once you do start leaning into the brakes there, but it's just a little bit easier to be smooth with the brakes here in the Pilot versus some of the other vehicles, like I said, I've driven from Honda in the past. Another thing that gives you a lot of confidence and peace of mind whenever you're driving here is the Honda Sensing Safety Suite, which is actually standard on all Pilots, even the base model now for 2019, which is really cool they include that. And that includes the adaptive cruise control, all that type of stuff. The only thing that's not standard on the base is blind spot monitoring and rear cross traffic alert. That's actually on the next level up on the EX. The EX has that, but the base model doesn't. Otherwise, though, all of them have the full suite, including the blind spot monitoring, which is really, really great. But having adaptive cruise is standard, and that's something a lot of other companies try and charge extra for. And the fact that this has that all standard is great. But we're coming up to a few corners here, so just test out the handling a little bit. Now, these are very gentle sweeping corners here at the foot of these mountains in Montana that we're at. It's beautiful out here. But one thing that's really cool about the Pilot here is that it has their active torque vectoring system. And unlike some others that are brake-based, this is actually a torque-based system where it'll actually channel power to those different wheels, as it's needed for better handling, which is appreciated. That it's one of the proper torque vectoring systems, and it's similar to the one that was in the Ridgeline that I reviewed in the past. And I was blown away when I reviewed the Ridgeline just how well it handled for a vehicle as large and heavy as it is. And so in this, it also feels pretty good. I mean, we're on some wet roads here. It's pretty cold, so I can't push it as much as I would like to really test it out. But most people aren't going to be bombing down a back road in a Pilot, so just cruising around in normal driving, it does give you a lot of confidence. And of course, that all-wheel drive system's constantly figuring out the traction situation. It is always putting power where it needs to go so that you have a very sure-footed ride. Also, as we're going over a few bumps here, the ride is very smooth here in the Pilot as well. That's one thing I'm noticing right off the bat, is it is very, very smooth, and actually seems to be a little more compliant than some of the competitors as well, which sometimes have a little bit of a firmer ride in an effort to have better handling. And some of the other ones are a little too mushy. This kind of seems to be a Goldilocks in between the two, where it's feels pretty flat in its handling, but also really soaks up everything very nicely and gives it a very cushy and soft ride that, of course, you'll definitely appreciate as you're driving in your daily driving circumstances. It's just going to be a very comfortable and relaxing vehicle to drive. But we have a little bit of a slick road here, but I'm going to do a little bit of an acceleration just to test out the power here in the Pilot. And here we go. Okay. Got a cool sound to this V6 as well, but picks up and goes really well. So we have a 3.5 liter V6 engine that does 280 horsepower, 267 pound-feet of torque, and 0 to 60 time should be about the same as it was in the 2016 Pilot, which is about a 6.5 second 0 to 60 time. And so it gets this thing up and going very well. I mean, that's a little bit better than some of the competitors as well, which some of them have less power, some have more, but they're a little bit heavier. I think the Pilot kind of, again, strikes a nice happy medium. 6.5 seconds is plenty to merge onto the highway, plenty of power for just about any kind of circumstance. Even if you do have it fully loaded, that's still, plentiful power. And, some of the other competitors are going down to 4-cylinder engines. I really appreciate that Honda's sticking with the V6 for this, because the turbos can compensate, but you do have to wait around for those turbos sometimes. Whereas with this V6, you just floor it, it gives you the downshift, it pulls with all its might, and you always have that power right there, which is very appreciated. So from a power standpoint, it's going to be totally plentiful for the average person that's running errands and something like this. All right, so now we're actually in Glacier National Park, and I'm driving on actual snow-covered roads. I'm in the snow mode here, and this all-wheel drive system is very sure-footed, even on just all-season tires. I'm not on snow tires or anything, but it's still gives you a lot of confidence. It hasn't been squirmy or anything. It's been very good with keeping going, and even if I hit the brakes, I mean, very, very good at distributing the ABS so that I'm not going sideways or anything. It keeps me braking in a straight line, and if I even try and accelerate a little bit more aggressively, it keeps me going straight. Again, it doesn't squirm or anything, which is really, really good. And it also, of course, in snow mode will delay your throttle response to help ease your traction so that you're not trying to break the tires loose as easily. But it works very, very well, and so I'm pretty impressed with this all-wheel drive system so far. But we're going to be doing some mild snow climb as well here and test it out even more. So this was the hill climb course, and as you can see, it's heavily covered in snow, very rutted, and the Pilot was in its snow mode for this attempt as well. And so as you can see, it's climbing little by little. You know, it's not going super quickly, but it's using the yaw sensors to kind of keep the vehicle in line a little bit more, so I didn't have to do quite as many steering corrections, but I still had to correct it a decent amount. But the fact that it's going up on all-season tires was really impressive to me. It really did a great job climbing up that and gave me a lot of confidence. But then the second attempt, I was in sand mode, which gets rid of the yaw sensor, so it's much more eager to go sideways on you, but it actually gives you a way more power. And so I was able to power up this hill at, you know, nearly like 30 miles an hour at one point. And so it just was very impressive with it, just how it just, you know, went flying up that hill. And really, again, goes to show this all-wheel drive system is very impressive. Another thing I'm really enjoying about the Pilot here is its lighter steering. Now, we're still on partially snow-covered roads here, so it's going to feel even a little bit lighter. But earlier, whenever I was out on the highway and stuff, it just has a really light but precise feel to it. And again, everything about this vehicle just really screams comfort to me. Not in any kind of like sloppy way, just in a refined way. I mean, the road noise is also very low in here. It's very, very quiet. Almost feels a class above some of the other stuff out there as far as just how nice it is in here. And you know, now this is again like a fully loaded Elite trim, so you're getting up to some of those higher luxury car price tags almost at this point, but it still is just such a huge value proposition with the Elite trim. But also going along with the steering, another thing that kind of surprises me is just how light this vehicle feels. Again, I can't push it on, you know, these back roads like I would like to, but it still is just, you know, these weigh 4,319 pounds, and you would think a 4,300 pound SUV would feel a little more lethargic, a little heavier, and this doesn't. It's just, it feels pretty light on its feet, and again, just so easy to drive, so comfortable and relaxing to drive. And so they really do a good job of masking that weight and making this feel very, you know, tossable and just, you know, a great driving vehicle. And I think the torque vectoring certainly helps with that. But the last two things I want to mention here about the Pilot are the fuel economy and the pricing of it. So fuel economy for these is 19 in the city, 26 on the highway for a combined average of 22. And I think that's totally right in line with what you get in this segment. You know, it's very competitive with all the rest. And I will say too, also with a naturally aspirated engine like this, I feel like you're more likely to actually achieve those ratings than you do with some of the turbo 4-cylinder offerings that some of the competitors have. Because with those, they often test well, but in real world driving, if you're ever getting on the gas harder in those turbos spool up, and they can diminish the fuel economy very, very quickly in those vehicles, and they can get really thirsty. Whereas with this, it's a little more straightforward, I think, with that. And so I think you would in real world driving see numbers very close to those. Whereas I've had, you know, like some of the other ones for a week, like the Ford Explorer. I mean, that just got like, I think 15 mpg if I was lucky, you know, because it has that turbo engine, and those turbos spool up and that fuel economy plummets. So I think this is you know, going to be one of the more fuel efficient ones, you know, in real world circumstances when you don't just look at the EPA numbers. So that's certainly something to consider there, but like I said, still very competitive numbers nonetheless from this V6. The last thing I want to mention here is the pricing of the Pilot. So I mentioned, like I said, this is the Elite one. You're getting closer to those luxury car prices. This one, as tested, is around $49,000. Fully loaded. Now you get everything in here. A lot of, you know, luxury car stuff, the wireless charging pad, heated steering wheel, you have the heated and ventilated seats, all those types of things are you kind of reserved for some of these higher trims here. But you know, like even the EX trim is a very well equipped vehicle, you know, still has heated seats, and those are much more affordable. And the LX, if you go for the front wheel drive version, those start at like $32,500, I think $32,445 to be exact. And so at that, you know, it's very, very competitive. If you do want the all-wheel drive, that's $1,900 extra on basically every model, and so that will drive that price up more. But on trims like the Elite here, the all-wheel drive is standard, so it's bundled into that $49,000 price tag there. But a nice thing too with Hondas is, you know, their pricing strategy. So there isn't any kind of, you know, options list. There isn't a million different things to pick from and packages and stuff. Sometimes we'll have 1 or 2 packages, but usually each trim just has equipment, and if you want nicer equipment, you go up to the next trim and that's it, instead of having to tick a million options boxes and, you know, scratching your head at the dealership trying to figure out what car has what features. This is very straightforward. But even at that $49,000 price, I think, you know, you get a lot of luxury car stuff. You get some very nice materials and stuff, like I mentioned earlier, and you know, it's still just a very, very nice vehicle to drive, and I think it's, you know, worth that price. And of course, you have the Honda reliability too, which will certainly help to retain not only the value of the vehicle if you ever do want to, you know, resell it, but also, you know, just make sure that, you know, it's an investment that's going to last you, and it's something that, yeah, you might be spending, you know, a little bit more money for some of these nicer trims, but you know, it's something the Hondas always seem to last very, very well, and so that's something to keep in mind too, that gives a little bit of an edge over some of the competition, which might not be quite as reliable in the long run. But anyway, so huge thanks once again to Honda for providing me with this Pilot here to review for you guys today. Let me know your thoughts on the Pilot in the comments below. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Take care.